Thank you so much for joining us on the Fox Local Stream. We are tracking major developments in the war with Iran. President Trump announced a 2-week ceasefire. That was almost 24 hours ago. That happened when we were live here on the Fox Local Stream. Now, the news came down about an hour and 20 minutes or so before his deadline to wipe out, quote, a whole civilization if Iran didn't open the Strait of Hormuz. Well, since then, the strait opened and it has once again closed after Israel's attacks on Lebanon. Joining me to talk more about these recent developments, we have two fine gentlemen today. National security analyst Hal Kempfer, always good to see you, Hal, and political scientist and Iran expert, UCLA professor Benjamin Radd. Professor, you joined me 24 hours ago. Always good to see you as well.
Thank you.
Great to see you, Marla.
All right, let's start with the professor and get your thoughts on where this ceasefire, where does it stand right now? Because we heard, as you just heard me report, that it has since closed.
We don't know where the ceasefire stands. I don't think we know what the messaging from the Iranian government is. I don't think it's consistent across its different factions at the moment. And we've had indications that that Lebanon and Israel are in the ceasefire, but then again, Lebanon is not part of the ceasefire. The Strait of Hormuz is open, but it's actually closed. There's still drones, there's still rockets being reported coming in. So, I mean, as it stands right now, very unclear. We've heard statements from the Iranian Speaker of Parliament, Ghalibaf, about the status of the ceasefire. And then we get 10-point plan or a 10-point provision from the Supreme National Security Council of Iran indicating something entirely else with conditions that zero chance the United States would have agreed to. So at this point, I don't think we have a firm understanding of exactly what the terms of the deal are, whom the United States is agreeing to these terms with, and what is and is not off limits.
Are you hearing the same, Hal?
I'm kind of, I have to say I'm in agreement. I'm not sure. There's, they said we've agreed to a 10-point plan. Which 10-point plan? Even the administration has said there's at least 3 versions of the 10 points out there. There was the one we had that literally goes back before the war started. There was one they said it's the one they're looking at. And then they said there's one that's out there in the internet universe or whatever that's being reported, but it's not that 10-point plan. And with that, there's serious problems with that. It talks about reparations. It talks about Iran controlling the strait. It talks about dropping all sanctions, Iran having enrichment. These are all the reasons that we went to war to begin with. So it's really strange. It's not quite clear if there is actually, there is a cessation of active firing in the strait itself, but there's still drones and other things that are flying across over to the Gulf states. And of course, Lebanon, Israel, after the ceasefire, just launched the biggest attack in southern Lebanon that they've had so far. So, and that's very unclear again. Prime Minister Sharif, who has been the peace broker or the primary person of Pakistan, who's been brokering this agreement, he had said yesterday when this was announced that cessation of or ceasefire in Lebanon was part of the deal. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu came out and said, no, that's never been part of the deal. It's not even clear if this was really coordinated with Israel. There are reports coming out of Israel that they were sort of informed of this after it had already been agreed to and just told what it was. But the administration said this has been coordinated with them all along. It's just not clear what this agreement is, what are the substantive part. And right now, it's if I'm a maritime shipper, I don't know if I want to put my ships into the strait. I don't know. Israel's telling me no. I can't get insurance to cover them. There's a lot of risk involved. It's a very, very tenuous situation.
I guess so. Now, Professor Radd, how do we make sense of all of this?
Well, I think the first issue is what is the messaging coming out of the Iranian government? So what I noticed was 2 things yesterday. I noticed Ghalibaf's, Foreign Minister Arakchi issued the statement about a ceasefire being agreed upon. The Pakistanis mediated this. And then soon after that, we saw the Supreme National Security Council issuing its statement that went way beyond, including those 10 conditions, those 10 provisions, half of which, or the first five of which, are conditions the United States would not under any circumstance agree to. What that indicates to me is there isn't, not only is there lack of unity in Iran's defense coordination, but I think we're even seeing it in its foreign policy and in the next phase of diplomacy, that it's quite possible we have a executive branch, foreign ministry, others who are in dialogue with the United States, pushing for one approach. And then we have the sort of hardline remnants of the Revolutionary Guard leadership in the formation of the Supreme Council, advocating for something entirely different, a lot more aggressive. We saw this in 1979 in the revolution back then, during the hostage crisis, the crisis where the American embassy workers were taken hostage. You had the foreign ministry opposed to that. And then you had the hardline Security Council surrounding then Ayatollah Khomeini in favor of it. The result was we saw resignation by the foreign minister and the deputy foreign minister. The point of all this is that there is sort of a precedent for this within the Iranian system, oftentimes, that you have different factions within leadership, and really it's the faction that ultimately has the power, in this case the Revolutionary Guard, that can dictate the terms. So again, what is it that they are asking for? What is it they're putting forward? We don't know, and I don't think they have a consistent message coming out either.
But would you say that President Trump has a consistent message coming out from the United States?
So yes and no. I think at the beginning of the conflict, he laid out the three conditions, which is basically zero enrichment, zero ballistic missiles, and no support for proxy groups. Those were the conditions really that underpinned the justification to go to war. We are now weeks later, a month and a half or so later. None of those conditions have been satisfied. We now have the additional fourth issue of the Strait of Hormuz being closed, or being targeted and effectively closed. And so that it seems to be the only aspect of this deal that has any movement is the issue regarding the strait. But what remains unresolved, the core issue for the United States, was that 450 or so kilograms of highly enriched uranium, which remains in Iran. The deal that the United States agreed to, at least from the Iranian side, does not indicate that the United States gets possession of that uranium, or that Iran's forced to give it up. So the president has yet to speak on that, but we've heard Vice President Vance and we've heard Secretary Hegseth comment on that part.
All right. Well, let me bring in Hal and get your reaction to that. I mean, you just heard the professor talking about the enriched uranium remains there in Iran. What does this mean for national security?
Well, it means a lot. I mean, that's the reason we went in there. That's a 60% grade. It could be elevated into 90%, be weapons capable with very little extra work. And that was why we were in there. That's why we did the strikes last June with the B-2s, was to basically take out that storage, what they had stored, and their capability to make any more. And the problem, I almost feel with this negotiation, looking at stuff, there's almost as if the administration and who's ever in charge in Iran are almost talking past each other when it comes to this. I was reading some stuff that was talking about there's discussions that we're going to go in and we're going to dig down into these destroyed sites and somehow pull out this enriched uranium and then get it out of the country, which I can tell you, having worked consequence management for weapons of mass destruction issues, that is not a small operation. That's a big operation, a lot of risk involved with that. It's going to take a very, very long time. You'd really have to have the full cooperation of Iran to do that. But if you look at the 10 points, at least what Iran's referring to, they're talking about enrichment's going to be allowed in there. And so I kind of feel like they're talking past each other on this. I think the real motivation for this was to get the strait open. And now the strait's not open, and they close it again. So I'm not quite sure what we're getting out of this, other than the fact that we've diminished the amount of drones and ballistic missiles going each direction, and certainly the fewer airstrikes going into Iran. But other than that, I'm just not seeing the movement. And with only 2 weeks and the amount of backed up oil, liquefied natural gas, and particularly fertilizer, which has to get out there around the world to be used as part of the planting season, to ensure that we don't have food insufficiency in the fall and winter, I don't know how that's going to get out of there in time. We only got 2 weeks. And if it's going to take days or a week to get the strait really open again, and it's going to take a while. I mean, Maersk came out and said they just don't feel confident they can send their ships out of there. That gives you an idea. They're an enormous shipping company. I think the second largest in the world. That tells you that there's a lot of work to be done before we can actually open up the strait.
Professor, let me ask you, since the enriched uranium remains, and you just heard what Hal said, I mean, the fact that President Trump says that we wiped out basically the Navy and the Marines in Navy and the Army, pardon me, in Iran, does that really matter if the uranium remains?
So if the objective is to completely diminish or to eliminate Iran's nuclear enrichment program, including that amount of uranium it already has enriched, then no, that remains outstanding. Now, granted, yes, the facilities have been targeted. It's difficult for Iran to get access to them, rebuilding centrifuges, all of that, including the top scientists and officials who are responsible for overseeing the program. But there is a sort of material knowledge that can be reacquired, and then facilities can be rebuilt. What remains the issue, however, is still that the United States needs to either get control of that uranium, or it needs to establish a protocol, some sort of oversight mechanism so that Iran cannot get to it, or if it does get to it, cannot utilize it. Now, yes, you need 90% enriched uranium for a nuclear weapon. However, anything between the 20% to 90% threshold is enough for a dirty bomb, a radiological bomb, which could still have tremendous impact on if used in a highly urban, dense civilian area. So this is a cause for concern. Iran has the capability to produce such a dirty bomb. And that is exactly why, Israel wants either it permanently dismantled and nothing left, or for the United States or others to go in there and retrieve what is there and remove that risk. So long as that risk remains outstanding, this matter remains unresolved.
Well, the White House saying today that Vice President Vance, he will be leading in-person peace talks in Pakistan this weekend. He'll be accompanied by President Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, as well as U.S. Envoy Steve Witkoff. What do you make of that, Hal?
Well, I think it's interesting. It is kind of interesting to me personally that J.D. Vance is going to be leading that, because that was something the Iranians had put forward, was that J.D. Vance maybe should be talking for the administration. I guess there was some frustration on their end with Steve Witkoff and probably Jared Kushner as well. So they wanted somebody at that level leading it. So I find it interesting that we've kind of acceded to that point, that they're going over there. Now, this makes obviously the meeting itself, the negotiations, being in Islamabad makes a lot of sense. The Pakistanis have been critical for this. Behind the scenes, that's being kind of talked about a little bit is the role China has played in this. China has enormous influence with Tehran. Also has enormous influence with Islamabad as well. Huge investments, a lot of money that goes in there, and strategic relationships. So behind the scenes, I kind of see that as well. I don't think they're going to be very far out there. In fact, I think there was a televised thing today where the ambassador of China was meeting with the foreign minister of Pakistan. And I thought it was interesting that we were covering that, but it gave you an idea of the Chinese influence in this. So I think that's going to be a very positive thing to see the negotiation go out, but I'm not quite sure where we start. I don't know what the common ground is that we've agreed to, because there's just so many variations or differences in terms of what the 10 points may or may not consist of and what that is. And I really kind of wonder about the enriched uranium. There was a few strikes that took place during this in March that I looked at, and it was at sites where they have the uranium. And the only thing I could come up with was that they were actually going in there to stop them from digging out the uranium. And it goes to Professor Radd's comment about building a dirty bomb or a radiological dispersion device. That would have been tremendously damaging if just one of those devices went off over Dubai or Doha or anywhere in Israel. You can imagine the impact that is, and the idea of decontaminating an area that broad in an urban setting. It would have had a tremendous effect in terms of what Iran was doing. It probably would have escalated the war a great deal as well. So a lot of concern about that, and I'm wondering if we're going to, I'm hearing some language. Sounds like we're almost going back to the inspection and oversight regime that we had during the JCPOA, which I find rather ironic.
All right, we're coming up on 3:15. Can you gentlemen stand by for a quick 2-minute break so we can carry on the conversation in 2 minutes?
Mm-hmm. Sure.
All right, very good. The conversation will continue in 2 minutes here on the Fox Local Stream. Stay with us. All right, welcome back everyone to the Fox Local Stream. I'm Marla Tejas in the Fox 11 studios in Los Angeles. We're carrying on a conversation about the 2-week ceasefire that President Trump announced just about 24 hours ago. The news broke about 3:45 yesterday afternoon. And to talk more about these recent developments on is the Strait of Hormuz open? Is it closed? Is a ceasefire underway? We have Hal Kempfer, security analyst, national security analyst, Hal Kempfer, and political scientist and Iran expert, UCLA professor Benjamin Radd. Professor Radd, let me get your thoughts on what are your hopes for this weekend when the vice president, J.D. Vance, travels to Pakistan and tries to broker more of this deal?
I will be honest, I'm not very optimistic that this ceasefire is going to hold. I think we're going to see Israel continue to strike Lebanon. I think we'll see Hezbollah continuing its operations there. I could still see Iran launching drones, or maybe not ballistic missiles, but definitely wreaking some havoc in the Gulf states still. The Strait of Hormuz is going to have its problems. It's not going to remain open and free for transit. Iran knows that that's a leverage, really the only leverage that it has in its sort of asymmetric campaign against the United States and Israel. I am hoping that it does not escalate beyond anything that we've seen. And I refer either specifically to President Trump's comments or his post from Truth Social yesterday, the civilization destroying rhetoric that he's been using, or anything else from the Iranian side, anything that would really escalate this to the point now where, let's say, we start seeing the Houthis involved even more so, targeting ships and cargo going through the Red Sea. That would create a whole other set of issues. We've seen what that can do not that long ago when the Houthis were attacking ships there. So really, I think the best we can hope for now is to see not an expansion of this and not to see it escalate, either rhetorically or kinetically, and hope that in their conversations over the weekend, the vice president and the Iranian delegation and others can really find a way, an off-ramp that allows everyone to save face. But having said that, the core issue remains that this regime is there for now. They are destabilized. They are weakened, less legitimacy domestically than they had coming in. And even when this war ends, or even if the ceasefire endures, this is a government that still has to reckon with the sentiments of its people, the opposition of its people, 80% of whom do not want to see that system of government intact, and an economy that is not just in shatters, but an industry and resources that are lacking now as a result of the bombing campaign conducted against them. So it'll shift. I think what we're starting to see now is conditions that either will result in severe domestic oppression or some form of popular resistance, rebellion, revolution, whatever it may be. That's what I'm looking for, to see if the seeds have now been planted for that to manifest, not in weeks, but really more speaking months and long term towards the end of the year.
And Hal, what about this idea of there has to be concern of course there is concern always about more loss of American life over there?
Well, that's a big concern, and I don't know that with all the proxies out there, and Professor Radd mentioned the Houthis, we're still not sure where the Houthis are going. They fired on Israel with missiles. It's looking more and more like they're going to start redoing reignite their anti-ship missile program, shooting through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, where 12% of commerce used to go through, depending on where you use the baseline, going up through the Red Sea into the Suez Canal. That would cause tremendous uncertainty with the maritime industry. It will cause huge supply chain issues across the world on top of what's happening with the Suez Canal. And then my big question is, and of course we're also seeing stuff, fortunately we did see the release of a journalist that was being held hostage by the Shiite militias in Iraq. I felt that was a positive thing, but it's not quite clear if the proxies are completely on board with this, or they are completely controlled, or who even controls the proxies at this point. But here's the thing. We're going into the end of the week, going into this negotiation. Iran right now, at least the IRGC faction, and Professor Radd may want to comment on, are there two different parts of this government even more? Because I'm sensing there's a real split with the ideological extreme and the actual elected government, Pezeshkian and Arashi and others there, and the Artesh itself, the regular army versus the IRGC and the besieged militia. But the question is, if they keep the strait closed, or they just make noise of keeping the strait closed, that's enough to scare mariners and the maritime insurance industry. enough that they won't want to send ships through there because they're just not sure if it's safe enough yet. We go to day 1, day 2, day 3. At some point, do we really have a ceasefire? Do we really have the agreement? If Iran does not open the strait, regardless of what pretense they give, if they don't open the strait, do we really have any agreement at all?
Yeah, and that makes us think about what we're already seeing at home and have been since the war broke out. And Professor, that is gas prices. You expect those to continue to rise?
I think the gas prices will reflect the instability that we still see. I think there's no certainty as to the outcome, and I think that the energy markets will reflect that. Unfortunately, until I think there's some solution. So even if there isn't a ceasefire, if there's some sort of consortium or group, maybe involving NATO states, European states, maybe China, maybe others, that could step in and at least provide some guarantee or an attempt guarantee of safety of transit for these ships. Anything that would, I think, alleviate the concerns of the energy markets and really global supply chain that's impacted by this. And that would I think go a long way towards weakening or undermining Iran's leverage over this strategic choke point.
All right. Well, I always learn from the both of you, and I'm always grateful that you take the time to join us on the Fox Local Stream. National security expert, analyst Hal Kempfer, and UCLA political science professor Benjamin Radd. Thank you both for being with me today. And we'll continue to watch the situation and have you back.
Thank you, Marla.
Thank you.
All right, now we want to get to some breaking news that is underway. This is in Harupa. Sky Fox with these live pictures, and you see that there is a crash involving this vehicle. This is the end of a pursuit in Riverside County. Again, the location is Harupa. Exact location still working to determine that. But what an ending this is. I mean, this is not just any ending of a pursuit. I'm working to get the information about what this suspect was wanted for, but it looks to be pretty serious given there is the SWAT armored vehicle out there. There are officers with drawn weapons as well. So significant damage to this vehicle. Let me just talk to the producer here on the Fox Local Stream that the pursuit suspect is still not in custody. Obviously, could be hurt inside this vehicle. Okay, so I'm told that to bring this to an end, the authorities use grapplers. We've been reporting on what a grappler is for some time. Other states and agencies have been using grapplers to bring pursuits to an end, reportedly in a safer manner. Perhaps you could argue this is or isn't a safer manner, but a grappler is essentially the tool that they can eject from a police vehicle that literally stops the vehicle in its tracks and makes it lose control. Here's a look at that moment that the grappler was used. So there it is. It looks like that may have been either Riverside County or CHP. I'm working to get information on that. And the grappler, let's see it connect. Okay, it's on this one that it actually hooks the vehicle. And it's sort of a pit maneuver, if you will, and bottom line is it got it to stop in that it lost control, and you saw that it ended up on the other side of the road. So it is a perhaps that's it's a sedan. It looks like a Cadillac. It is a Cadillac, I'm being told, white Cadillac, tinted, very tinted windows. The grappler is employed, and boom, loses control into the concrete barrier on the other side. Would not be surprised, obviously, if the pursuit suspect is injured in all of this. But meanwhile, because the suspect has not come out of that vehicle, and it could be because he or she is injured, we have the authorities out there with their guns drawn and the SWAT vehicle as well. Do we know, and yes, it is a Cadillac CTS, do we know the want in the first place? We're still working to figure out what this pursuit suspect was wanted for. But to bring out the armored vehicle, it has to be something very serious. I mean, this suspect would have to be considered very dangerous. So we are working to get some more information as we now have a zoomed in view of this pursuit crash. I mean, that is just a head-on collision against the concrete barrier. The concrete barrier won on that one. So it's hard to see. Usually in these situations like this, we're able to see the airbags that have been deployed, but because of those tinted windows and because that window does remain intact, we can't see anything inside. So authorities out there, it looks like, let's see, I'm looking at my stage manager right now, guns drawn. Still guns are drawn. It's hard for me to see clearly, but yeah, absolutely, guns drawn. Very serious disposition on behalf of officers out there, and you see the canine as well. So they've got the canine, the armored vehicle, guns drawn. Riverside County Sheriff, I just saw their logo out there as well. So they are the responding force behind this. This is something we will continue to watch. And do we have an exact location just yet? Okay, we're working to get that to you. But again, this is Jurupa in Riverside County, as we're working to get a little bit more. Belgrave Avenue, I'm being told. If you are watching us from Riverside County, you probably know where that is in Jurupa. Belgrave Avenue. Looking this up to see if I can get more of a pinpointed location, but nonetheless, still no movement from inside the vehicle. It will be interesting to see if first responders like firefighters, paramedics arrive to help deal with the situation, because again, it would not be at all surprising to learn that the suspect behind the wheel is injured, may not even be conscious at this point. We don't, obviously have ears on the ground, so maybe they have already made contact with them. They could be on a cell phone. There are endless scenarios that could be playing out down below. So we'll keep a watch on this. We're going to take a quick break on the stream and update you accordingly. Again, you're watching the end of a pursuit crash, now standoff in Riverside County. More to come on the Fox Local stream. We'll see you in 2 minutes. Welcome back, everyone, to the Fox Local stream. I'm Marla Tejas in the Fox 11 studios in Los Angeles. Your time check right now is 3:31 on the West Coast. We are following this breaking news out of Riverside County. This is the end of a police pursuit involving the Riverside County Sheriff's Department. You see the SWAT vehicle out there. It ends in a crash, a significant crash. And you see, this is the moment where authorities employed a grappler. And you're going to see the power of a grappler to bring a pursuit to an end really quickly. Essentially snags the vehicle. It's a Cadillac CTS, by the way. going at significant speed here on surface streets in Riverside County in Jurupa. This is Belgrave Avenue, and boom, causes it to lose control and right into the concrete barrier on the other side of the lanes there. No movement thus far from inside that Cadillac CTS as authorities have their guns drawn. No word if that driver is injured. Of course, would be surprised to no one if in fact the driver suffered some serious injuries given the collision there with that concrete barrier. So we're waiting to find out more information about that. The want still undetermined. We will get you that information just as soon as we learn it. And as we zoom in now, it's hard to get a sense of anything inside that vehicle because those the windows are so tinted, so incredibly tinted. All right, we'll keep a watch on that. In the meantime, we are following this breaking news from, let's see, this is the so-called Ketamine Queen, is sentenced to 15 years in prison for selling actor Matthew Perry the drugs that killed him. Let's go live to downtown LA and Christina Gonzalez with more on the sentencing today. Christina?
Yeah, we were in court and she indeed was there. Let's go to the images because she was pretty upset about the whole thing there. Jasvine Sangha, you mentioned the Ketamine Queen. Judge Sherilyn Peace Garrett sentenced her to 15 years. The maximum for this was 17 years. But this for supplying the ketamine linked to the death of actor Matthew Perry. You may remember his body was found in a hot tub at his home back in October of 2023. Now, Sangha, she admitted selling the ketamine, but argued that she did not actually inject Perry with it, that she was not as responsible as they were making her out to be. At one point, her attorney, Mark Garagos, even saying in court that Perry was an addict and he was going to do what he was going to do. Now, when he said that, I got to tell you, Perry's family, they were there in court. You know, you could see it in their faces. I know that they've been to all these hearings, but they were pretty upset. As a matter of fact, after court, we heard from Perry's stepfather, correspondent Keith Morrison. Listen.
Well, the law is the law, and this is a very fair judge, and she considered the case very carefully and delivered a highly reasoned sentence.
I'm bitterly disappointed. There's no way that Jasvine is 5 times more culpable than the person who injected Matthew Perry with the drug.
And what he's referring to actually is Kenneth Iwamasa, Perry's personal assistant. He is the one, he has yet to be sentenced actually, and he is the one who administered that lethal dose. Another person who has yet to be sentenced is Eric Fleming, who was the go-between between Sangha and the assistant. They're the last two that remain to be sentenced, and they both face 15 and 25 years, so we'll have to see. But some of the other co-conspirators have gotten 3 years, 2.5 years, because they were selling much less amount of drugs. Now, I got to tell you, Sangha actually did address the court. She stood up there in what was not very well received statement. I've heard a lot of these, but what she got up there and she seemed very genuine, and she was very touched when she heard the families. But when she got up there to speak, she addressed the judge. She never talked to the families herself, even when she said, "Look, I'm sorry and I take responsibility." And she did that, and then she went on for the rest of a very lengthy statement talking about herself and how she's working on herself and how much she's doing in prison and how that should take into effect, and how, because she's such a, you know, at one point, and I wrote this down, because when she used the words that I am out injecting positivity, you know, I looked at the reporter next to me from the Rolling Stones, and we kind of looked at each other like, did she just use that terminology, injecting anything? So it was a very strange statement. It was received as such, even as she obviously had her own family there who were telling us off camera. They were saying how she's such a nice woman, very well-educated woman, very into charity, into all kinds of things, that she made bad decisions into going into the line of business of being a drug dealer. And having Matthew Perry die because of it. And not only Matthew Perry, keep in mind, and this is the judge very quickly, this played a big part into it. She admitted to selling the ketamine back in 2019 that killed a 33-year-old man called Cody McLaury. His sister was in court today, and she was also letting the Ketamine Queen have it, saying if you had stopped after he died, perhaps Perry would be alive today. All those things played into this, and it's the reason why she got the 15 years, which was on the upper range. We'll be here for the other 2 sentencings, which will be later this year. We'll keep you updated. I'm Christina Gonzalez in downtown Los Angeles. And back to you in the studio.
Christina, since you were in the courtroom and you physically got to see her, do you get the sense that she understands the gravity of this?
I think she does. I'm not going to say, I mean, when the family was speaking and we heard for the first time from Matthew Perry's stepmother, it was hard to listen to her. It was tear-jerking. It really, when somebody's saying how their family is destroyed, I still get upset about it, and so was she. That was the only time that I saw, Sangha visibly looking at them, having to face them, and tears in her eyes. She was upset about that. I think she understands the effect of what has happened. I think that there's also a lot of concern from her about how well she is doing and how she's doing so much better, and that should be taken into account. And that may all very well be, but it's not necessarily very well received at this state of the game. She's done very well in prison, obviously. She's involved in a lot of things, and now she'll have a chance to continue being involved in those things and maybe even get some of those years reduced if she's involved in some of those things. But at this point, it was not just ketamine. They found all kinds of drugs in her apartment. She was very open about being this big dealer and selling to the high-end crowd and so forth. So yeah, to answer, again, I think she understands what happened here was very wrong. How could you not? Does it seem to come across the way perhaps it should? Maybe not. But we'll have to see. I mean, I'm only going by her statement,
Well, and when you talk about how open she was, when this news first broke, she had a very big following on Instagram, and she was not shy about this necessarily.
No, she wasn't. And not only that, remember, she actually tried to have some of the text messages deleted. Mm-hmm. It's not like she came forward immediately and said, "Oh my God, I did this." No, that was not the case. That also played into what the judge, recommended. It took a while for her to come forward.
Did she get
and
time
to admit
served?
anything until she had to. The 2 years of the time served is what came into, I think that's why she didn't get the 17 and a half.
Got it.
I think
okay.
it's 15 years.
Okay.
And keep in mind, if it were not ketamine, if it were any other drug, real quickly, a real class like a methamphetamine or something like that, it would be mandatory 20 years.
Well, it's just interesting to say that,
15
though,
years
a real drug. Meanwhile, Matthew Perry is dead. I mean, I would think that...
Because ketamine, and I say real drug, and maybe that's, you have a point there. Ketamine is used medically.
Right.
It's not in the same class as methamphetamines, and classifications, at least not in the eyes of the law.
Right.
So if he had died from a methamphetamine overdose, it would be 20 years mandatory. Ketamine is taken in a different category because it does help some people and because it's considered medicine, although this was not being administered like medicine.
Right,
obviously.
and that's obviously the problem. Okay, well, interesting, and as you said, more sentences to come in the other cases, and we'll be following Christina Gonzalez's full report tonight on the Fox 11 News at 5. Thanks so much. On to this. We are learning more about the man arrested in connection to that massive warehouse fire at the Kimberly-Clark Distribution Center in Ontario. We've been following this the last couple of days. Police have identified that suspect as 29-year-old Shamel Abdul Karim. Officials say he was an employee of a third-party distribution partner, not a Kimberly-Clark staffer. The fire broke out about 12:30 yesterday morning, so just after midnight. 20 employees were inside at the time. They were able to get out. They're not hurt. The building was filled with paper products that can easily catch fire, like Kleenex, toilet paper, even diapers. Ontario police also looking into the context of this video that is circulating on social media. Take a look. They say it appears to be filmed by the suspect. You can see someone setting fire to rolls of tissue paper. There it is. Using a lighter. That suspect is now being held without bail on several arson-related felony charges. That is scary to watch. Well, the company is donating historic homes to help Altadena residents rebuild after the Eaton fire. We were there this morning. Mario Ramirez was on scene for us for Good Day LA as that first home was delivered. Here's Mario Ramirez in that reaction.
I'm getting a little tired, but also look, instead of it looking like a weird mobile home walking down the freeway, it looks like a house is about to happen right there.
Talk to me about how close we are.
From Lincoln Heights to Altadena, crews worked overnight to move this 100-year-old Victorian home.
I don't know, I'm kind of speechless in a way. It's just an incredible experience because there was no home and now there's a home.
The homes, preserved during a new development project, and are now being donated by the nonprofit developer Decro Corporation to families who lost everything in the Eaton fire.
This was just a yellow, ashen, yellowy gray sky with a glowing red sun, and everything was smoldering. And this was my house was stucco that burned.
Many in Altadena continue to face long delays with permits and costs.
It's technically a remodel. It's not building from the ground up. It's not for the faint of heart, but I do encourage people to think of it as an option.
We have many people who haven't even taken their first steps yet. All of us are carrying so much loss and trying to juggle so many things. We could use more help.
Crews will spend the next several weeks reassembling and restoring the structure right here in this lot. And while this marks a new beginning for the homeowner here, she says so many of her neighbors are still struggling through the rebuilding process. More than 6,000 homes were destroyed here in the Eaton fire, and thousands of residents have yet to take that first step in the process. In Altadena, I'm Mario Ramirez, Fox 11 News.
All right, Mario, thank you. Well, a big celebration in store for UCLA's women's basketball team after their historic NCAA championship win against University of South Carolina. Our Gerard Moncure, he joins us now live from the UCLA campus with more. I'm jealous of you. I wish I was out there because what a win that was on Sunday, Gerard.
Marla, it was dominant, one of the biggest wins in the history of the women's final in the NCAA era. We were outside Pauley Pavilion where the big show starts at 6 o'clock. Fans can get in at 5 o'clock. They're already outside lining up. It's kind of a first come, first served deal. And of course, they want to come and pay tribute to the women, the NCAA champions, who are very deserving of all the accolades that they are receiving. Of course, they have been on a lot of TV already. They were at the Laker game last night. They were honored by Jimmy Kimmel. They were on Jimmy Kimmel. So it's going to be quite the show here. The Big Ten Network is actually televising tonight's celebration. We're going to talk right now with Joe, who is a UCLA fan. And Joe, why are you here, and what did it mean to you to watch the women pick up this title a couple days ago?
Well, first of all, I'm a UCLA basketball fan. And anything with basketball, now that the girls were doing really well from last year, I was rooting for them, went to the Final Four, and something was missing. But this year, they had that long streak. They were together, seniors. I followed Rice, Hawkes, Betts, Googleage, a couple other girls I don't know, but they were all in uniform. What made the difference this year around is, I believe, is the three-point shooting. They had three-point shooting. They had another point guard. I forgot her name, but besides Rice, they had a different point guard. And
so Shirley Sledger-Walker.
Yeah. Shirley Sledger-Walker made the difference in a sense to give Rice a break, to control the tempo, and so I feel everything. The coaching was great, but overall, just the unity, their game plan. But at the end of the day, the shooting made the difference. They brought in that three-point shooting that just changed the game all around, besides Lauren Betts on the inside.
We have not seen the men win a title here since 1995. So what does it mean to UCLA fans that the women were actually able to bring a title back here to Pauley Pavilion?
Well, it's amazing because, again, the UCLA boys team is great. They have a good coach. I know basketball, so I know a good coach when I see one. But to have the girls come in such a long time, the UCLA's tradition of winning championships, and then coming in this time around, and the women making the difference for UCLA, bringing that tradition back to Pauley Pavilion, and at the same time hanging the banner. Besides I believe we have 11 banners. Now we're going to have one women's NCAA championship.
You told me that you coach women's basketball. So what do you think it's going to mean to girls and young ladies here in the area to see what's going to go on here tonight, to see what already happened in Phoenix over the weekend? What do you think it's going to mean for the women's game here in Southern California?
Well, not only do I follow and coach girls basketball, I travel all across the country, Texas. I follow girls basketball here in Texas. So I'm a student of the game. And so what I see, a lot of talent here in California, a lot of good talent, a lot of good high school, Sierra Canyon, Etowanda, a lot of great college, high school girls. And I feel that it's going to elevate UCLA because of the celebration, the way they won, the unity. The coach is really good. I'm very, very, very close to watching the coaches. And Close is a great coach. She's going to bring good talent into UCLA.
Joe, thank you for your time. Appreciate it. Enjoy the activities tonight.
Thank you so very much. Go UCLA.
Marla, so let's roll back over here in the shade. Marla, we're going to be able to talk to the players a little after 5 o'clock. They're going to let us in, and we'll be set up. We'll hear from Corey Close and probably Kiki Rice, Lauren Betts, some of the others, Gabriela Jaquez, and get their take on what the last couple of days have been, because it has been a whirlwind few days for this team after they won the championship. They really have been the talk of the sports world.
Oh, yeah.
For about 3 days now, which is always a pretty amazing thing to see for a local team.
Oh, I mean, we were watching it Sunday, and, of course, Gerard, I have a 1-year-old baby girl at home. She's too young to understand it, but I used to play in high school. And it was my favorite sport, and just to see this and to see Lauren Betts at 6'7", by the way, I mean, absolutely dominant. And then Gabriela Jaquez after saying, she has dreamed of this moment over and over and over. And Corey Close, who has been the head coach since 2011, and finally this came to fruition. And she quoted John Wooden, I don't know how many times, Gerard. I mean, I was getting choked up watching the coverage.
Well, she's a John Wooden disciple. Mm-hmm. They met once a week for several years. And, part of her coaching style is in the Wooden style of elevating the person first and the basketball player second. And clearly it showed when you get 6 seniors that come back to school for a single purpose, where they, as Lauren Betts likes to say, they put their egos on the shelf, and it's all about the team first. The result is what we saw on Sunday, a dominating performance over a South Carolina team, Marla, by the way, that had been in the championship game 3 years in a row.
Of course, I'm glad you brought that up.
They won it a couple years ago. They were dominated by UConn, and then they dominated. I mean, it's so funny because the Elite Eight game against Duke and the Texas game in the Final Four were tougher games for this squad than South Carolina, where, they had the largest lead at the end of 3 quarters in the history of the women's title game. That's how much they dominated the game. And let's not forget, they also played South Carolina here 2 years ago. I was at the game. I covered it. And they dominated the Gamecocks then, too. And that's a year they went on and won the national title. So, Corey Close has got a little thing going on right now against Dawn Staley, where she's kind of handled her. But getting back to what you said, she is a disciple of John Wooden. And John Wooden has to be looking down proudly at what he saw on Sunday and the way this team was put together and what they accomplished together.
Yeah, Marla. I mean, she quoted him. Allow me to just repeat this quote, Gerard. Talent is our floor, but our character will determine our ceiling. I love a good quote. I love a good quote, Gerard. I'm a sucker for a good quote.
Well, John Wooden was full of them, and the pyramid of success is something that Corey Close follows. As a lot of basketball coaches do. Anyone that grew up in the Southern California area like I did, I grew up watching the 70s UCLA teams. So about what a banner means here, despite whether it's on the men's side or the women's side. Mm-hmm. It is just the excellence of UCLA. Yep. And it's going to be celebrated here tonight.
Yeah, well, good. Okay, well, can't wait for your full reporting a little bit later tonight on the Fox 11 News. Gerard Moncure out there for us live at UCLA. Thank you so much.
You got it, Marla. My pleasure.
All right, we're going to take a quick 2-minute break, and then we will celebrate Armenian Heritage Month here at Fox 11. Stay tuned. All right, welcome back to the Fox Local Stream. I'm Marla Tejas in the Fox 11 studios in Los Angeles. We want to get you updated on the breaking news out of Riverside County that we've been following. The end of a police pursuit involving Riverside County Sheriff's deputies. You see the SWAT vehicle out there. Live pictures from Sky Fox where this all came to a crashing end. And yes, there is that vehicle up against the concrete barrier on the other side of the road. This is Belgrave Avenue in Harupa. They use some sort of a grappler device. You'll see it snag the back of this Cadillac CTS. Pursuit suspect inside, causes it to lose control, goes across the lanes on the other side. Fortunately, there was not oncoming traffic. Crashes there into ultimately a home that is on Antigua Drive. So no movement thus far from inside the Cadillac. You have to wonder if that suspect inside is conscious. It was given the force of that collision there. So we'll keep a watch on that as that situation continues to unfold. And no word yet on the why police were pursuing this suspect in the first place. Okay, on to this much lighter tone here. Fox 11 is celebrating Armenian heritage today. We're introducing you to a local artist with a very unusual studio. Our Araxia Karapetian shows us how he's turning that metal into sculptures, many of which is inspired by his Armenian roots and personal story.
This family mechanic shop has been part of the community for nearly 50 years. Tero Khayalyan's father and uncle built this business after immigrating from Syria.
Basically, it's a family-owned business. I've grown up here in the shop, and I also love doing art, as you guys can see.
From a young age, Tero saw the world a little differently.
I used to see car parts differently when I was younger, and I do abstract painting as well, but I get more satisfaction out of scrap metal car parts in my sculptures when I create them.
Scrap metal, old bolts, even kitchen utensils. In Tero's hands, they became sculptures.
Nothing is junk to me, yeah. If I could weld it, I'm gonna create it.
Friends and family now save their scraps for him.
All of a sudden you see like friends and family with a bucket with their old spoons and spoons. They bring, hey, make something out of this. And yeah, I use nails, screws, bolts, nuts, anything that I could, get my hands on.
And while he spends his days working on exhaust systems, he says that work is an art form of its own.
My specific job here is I do exhaust systems. So I bend tubings and pipings. That's more like an art form for me.
Creating these pieces isn't easy.
It takes a lot of toll on your hands and your body for sure. A lot of heat comes out to it. A lot of grinding.
For Tero, the process is also therapeutic.
It's a different approach that I take to it. I challenge myself even more when I'm doing my sculptures than rather me sitting there and just doing a regular painting. The experience from it, the meditation through my sculptures, it satisfies me a lot more.
Many of his pieces reflect his Armenian heritage, including a powerful sculpture honoring the memory of the Armenian genocide.
I want to show people what they could see, what we have endured with all the pain through one of my sculptures.
The work is filled with symbolism from the Armenian alphabet to forget-me-not flowers.
The base is a tree trunk, and then we have our Armenian alphabet going on top. Our language, it's dear to us, so I had to incorporate that on the bottom. While your vision goes up, you see our ancestor remains on top. With the forget-me-not flowers surrounding it, we have a sword holding straight down, strong, with a cross on top, and eternity symbol. So we're eternally grateful for our culture and our Armenian people.
But his wife Maral says inspiration can also come from everyday life, even pop culture.
It started with my obsession with the Johnny Depp trial, to be completely honest. I hear Amber shout
24/7 in our household.
Yes, the entire family was watching.
Tito has always really loved Johnny Depp and Tim Burton. Those are his true inspirations. And so when we found out that he was on trial, he just started creating.
The result? A massive metal black pearl ship and a sculpture of the Mad Hatter's hat.
Those were actually labors of love for him.
At home, Maral says life with an artist is never boring.
It's actually quite exciting in our household to have someone as creative as Tito live with us. Every day is something different.
And sometimes major events in the world can spark some new ideas.
Closer to the 2020 Artsakh War in Armenia, it just evoked something inside of him to start creating more.
Today, there's even a small room in the shop filled with his work.
It's like my little museum, right? It's funny because whoever comes and once their car is done, they're gonna come and pay. They just literally walk in, they're like, where did I just step into, you know? And we totally forget about the payments and then we're talking about my art.
And his latest collection is taking flight as he gets ready for his upcoming exhibit featuring a new collection inspired by birds.
It's gonna be called Mind and Flight, where, you know, trying to elevate your thoughts and your mind to be free.
For Tito, the theme is also about life's journey.
It's like a life story, you know? How we all start off as alone, then we find like our significant other, and then we build a home, and then finally you fall in love and you become a parent.
Like everything he creates, the art comes from something deep inside.
Whatever I have inside of me, I have to let it out, and the only way that I could really express, not through words, but I have to express it through my art.
The upcoming show, Mind and Flight, opens tomorrow at the Glenmark Hotel in Glendale. The collection features a series of bird-inspired sculptures representing life, love, and freedom. If you stop by the family shop, don't be surprised if a simple car repair turns into an art tour. I bet it would, and I bet the customer would love that. All right.